Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today I'm interviewing Tony Marino, who started playing piano when he was very young, and he played with some of the greats, Brazilian and afro-cuban jazz musicians, for example, with Mark Soskin, Laurence Hobgood, Breno Sauer, many, many people. Now, Tony, I want to welcome you to the Susan Brender Show, and I have a lot of questions for you because you have many stories, and I think the audience will enjoy them. So let's start with when you started out from 1995 to 2008. You were a composer, a pianist, and a band leader of a Latin jazz group. Now, how did that all start?
Well, I always, from when I first started playing, one of my very first piano teachers, Bill DelGovernatore, sort of turned me on to a lot of different styles of music, and I seem to be the most attracted, to Afro-Cuban, Brazilian jazz, bebop, like Dizzy Gillespie type music. So they're the genres that I feel the most comfortable in, and that I really enjoy playing and writing that type of music.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. There are many young people around today who are doing rap, who are doing hip-hop, who are doing all kinds of music, but do they even know people like Dizzy Gillespie? And they don't. Why not?
Yeah, I think some of it may be because maybe when they're studying music in schools, maybe they're not exposed to that type of music. And it's kind of surprising, too, because when you think of how heavily all music was influenced, especially by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, a lot of the stuff that's being done today were things that really those guys had started with, fusing different styles of music from all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, this is something I always thought about. When people play music, and the music is really very beautiful, does it give one a feeling that they're being transformed in ways they can't even describe?
Yeah, it's one of the. I'll tell you what I think is really funny is a lot of times, like as I'm starting to write music, as I'm writing stuff. Either I start out with an idea, or there's some feeling or person or situation that kind of inspires the song. And in terms of how other people interpret the music, or sometimes someone will say, "Oh, what this meant to me, or how it's made me feel," is just really neat because a lot of times I think people's expectations, like when they tell you what it means to them. To me, I really enjoy that, and I never try to say, well, what I really meant with that was this, because the whole thing about it is how it makes a person feel, and I hope that it makes them feel good. And the question that you asked, about in terms of feeling romantic or sad or bringing back some memory of something, it does a lot of things. It touches you emotionally. And, I think you and I had a discussion before, certain types of music, like, for instance, like tangos, that could be associated with kind of a sensual type of music. Sometimes it's melancholy, and, so music does have a tendency, to touch a lot of different people in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, how did you choose your genre? Because certainly the music that you play is very popular among certain people, but not everyone feels the way you do about the music. They want to be very up on things. They want to be like in the moment, and in the moment today, everything is like sort of technologically done. So how did you choose your genre?
Well, I would have to say the first, like I said, when I first really, my very first great piano teacher is a friend of mine from Philly named Bill DelGovernatore. So he exposed me to some music, and then I grew up in Philadelphia, so there's a radio station called WRI And I remember back in the 70s, a lot of Brazilian students, exchange students that were attending Temple University, which the radio stations run out of, brought Tanya Maria albums to the station. So I remember hearing her, I fell in love with her. And then about 1987, on the same month, it was in February, I heard Paquito de Rivera, and I met my wife the same month. So two very significant things happened.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I met the love of my life, and I heard the music that I love so much. And, you know, when I heard Paquito, I mean, you know, it just really changed me. Claudio Arditi was, you know, playing on his albums. And, you know, from the time I really heard that, that pretty much set the direction for me.
Now, I'll tell you something interesting. Last week I was in New Orleans, and I lucked out. As it turns out, there was a big festival, a free festival, that is, all over the streets in New Orleans. And one thing that I noticed was that there were different people from all different backgrounds playing the most incredible jazz, blues, you name it. And interestingly enough, when I talked about young people, the audiences that were listening to the music were very mixed. And it was beautiful to see how they responded, even the young people, how they responded to jazz and the blues and the rock and the zydeco and all of that. So if you had a chance, here it goes, if you had a chance to play anywhere around the world, where would you choose to play?
You know, there's so many places that I can think of. So, geez, I guess right where I'm living, you know, it would be, you know, so we're right now, in fact, right now we're in the process of moving. So we're living in the Santa Barbara area, and we're going to be moving to Fort Wayne, Indiana, where we had lived before. So I would have to say Fort Wayne, Indiana. That would be my choice.
Now, do you think the people in Fort Wayne are interested in the music you play?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I was really happy with, you know, like there's a lot of people that maybe turned off to jazz, and I think the reason being is that it might be a little hard if you haven't studied music or understand techniques that would be necessary to play, you know, very complex music. And I think a lot of people get turned off because it might be a little difficult for them to relate to it. So I think the thing with especially Latin jazz is you have the luxury of being able to improvise and play jazz, but the rhythms just seem to draw the people in. And it's kind of funny because one of the things that was pointed out to me, one of my mentors and teachers was Breno Sauer, and his wife Noza Sauer, and so I studied Brazilian music with Breno, and also like tangos and so forth. And one of the things that pointed out, which I played and I didn't realize, is when you listen to like a samba, people really seem to enjoy it. And so the samba bass line is essentially the same as a polka bass line. And when the music starts playing, one of the things I really enjoy, especially playing like outdoor festivals, because there's a big variety of people. Right. And you can see a lot more, you know what I'm saying? So you have little kids and, you know, anywhere from infants all the way up to, you know, senior citizens. And once the music starts going, you watch, after about a bar or so, you'll see people tapping their feet or moving in synchronization with the music. Mm-hmm. So the thing I think that's really beautiful about Latin jazz is that even without the music, the rhythms make it, you know, like interesting, and I think people really get into it. And then on top of that, then you also have, you know, like chord changes that are not common maybe in popular music, and you know, also the improvisations. But I think the key is that rhythm is always there, and people seem to relate to that rhythm. You know.
Yeah, well, I understand very much how that does influence the way I feel. Now, you must have a lot of stories of when you were playing music, composing music, the people that you were meeting at the time. So give our audience an interesting story that you think will either make them laugh, make them cry, draw out their emotions. Any stories?
Well, Yeah, I have hundreds of them. Some of them I wouldn't be able to tell you because the FCC would get on you. Well, I have a lot of them, but I'll tell you one story I think that's really funny. When I was a kid, I was playing in this Italian-American wedding band who are still active. So there's this guy named Frank Marco who runs a band called Idea 71 out of Philadelphia. And I remember we had 3 weeks in a row we went to play, and each job was canceled because the people did not get back to us, and they wound up booking a band that was less expensive than ours. So we wind up showing up. So actually it was two times in a row. So the third time we show up to a gig, there was this big ballroom, and all the tables were all set, and there's only 6 people sitting at the head table. So Frank, who's the singer and the guitarist in the band, went over, and we were saying, oh, geez, we hope, because the 2 weeks prior to that, Frank didn't get a deposit, so he was just going on a good faith sort of contract thing that we were going to play these gigs. So we were all saying, oh my God, this is going to like the 3rd week in a row. So anyway, Frank goes and talks to the people. He comes back, and this was kind of sad. He says, what happened is the groom backed out, and the bride's from out of town, so they weren't able to get their deposit back. So it was the bride and her brother, and then like one of either her sister or brother and their spouse and her mom and dad. So when Frank comes back and says this, our sax player has his sax hanging, and he says in sort of an Italian accent, he says, Franco, I cannot waste my performance in front of 6 people. I must play in front of thousands. It will go to waste. It was just really funny because just the way he said it, he was just joking. But I remember thinking, geez, I play every day for free. I don't care, getting paid. But it turned out like the night was great. I mean, we played for 4 hours, and the people made the best of it. But it was kind of sad, but it was kind of funny too. Mike really broke the ice, and even the people were laughing.
Yeah, I could see 6 people. Now, this reminds me of the Blues Brothers. Did you ever see the Blues Brothers, the movie?
Oh, yeah, that's one of my favorite movies, yeah.
Right. Now, think about how it felt for them. People were booing them and throwing things at them at the beginning of their entertaining people. And, of course, it was equally as funny. I mean, it was so funny that it really made me laugh. But, okay, let's move on. Now, where would you like to perform? We talked about the places, and you said Indiana, but come on. I mean, really?
Yeah, it's really a great place. My family and I, in fact, my children grew up there, and we lived all over the country. And it's just a really nice town. There's a lot of things going on in terms of music. The musicians out there are absolutely unbelievable. And they are here. I mean, every place that we live, there's incredible musicians. But it's just a nice place. It's very family oriented, and there's tons of places to play, even more so than in the Santa Barbara area for jazz and original music.
Really?
Yeah, the people are really open to it too. Like I think a lot of problems is when people go out to hear music, I think they have an expectation of the music, and thinking what it should be. And it seemed to me like people are open there. They seem to come out and are willing to experience different things. So
now, what would happen if you were invited to a place like Japan? Would you want to go? And have you heard about how they react to musicians?
Yeah, and in fact, there were a few times where situations did come up, to play there. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to work it out schedule-wise, and then, with the costs and so forth, it just wasn't lucrative or monetarily to our advantage to do it. But yeah, I would like to play all over the world. There's many places, so. Yeah. I really love, probably my favorite, I like playing small clubs, and I like festivals a lot too, especially like when there's a mixed crowd. Because it's really cool watching like little kids getting into it. You see, it's just a really good feeling. Seeing like families but then the club scene when you're playing a small club, it's a little different audience because it has people that are they have to be at least 21 years old, and it's more couples as opposed to families kind of thing.
Right. Now let's talk a little bit about the process of learning, of composing, of playing the music that you play. Give our audience a chance to understand how it all begins for you. How do you start? How do you start composing? How do you start writing music in ways that really make you feel great? And there's probably I'm going to call it the Tony process. Tell our audience about the Tony process.
Well, it really varies. I mean, I've had songs. Okay, so the song that took me the longest to write was about 6 years. And I didn't work on it for 6 years. No, it was lying on my piano, and I'd write a little piece and subtract a little piece and so forth. I had one song that I literally sat down at the piano and wrote in probably 5 minutes. And but sometimes it starts out with maybe like a rhythmic thing. Sometimes it might start out with a melody. A lot of times, I would say probably the most common way is I start out with the chord changes. And then right over that, experiment with different melodies and all. So I really couldn't say that there's one set formula. Because sometimes it might be like for instance, I wrote a song that I dedicated to Oscar Piazzolla, and there's like a repetitive piano pattern. That's how that song started out. So it's a number of different ways. And sometimes, like I remember, there's a good friend of mine that's a DJ in Fort Wayne on a public NPR station called WBLI, and he's like really into like kind of straight ahead stuff. He likes Jimmy Smith, and I composed a blues song, and it was kind of funny because I told my wife, I said, this reminds me of Bruce. And she said, well, what kind of song is it? I said, blues. And she said, well, how about if you call it Blues Reidenbach? And it turns out like that's his theme song now, but it felt like him, So it's just a combination of, maybe like some type of inspiration or a situation you have with somebody that's close to you. And then in terms of how it starts out, most commonly I start out with chord changes. But again, I've had maybe like a little rhythmic pattern that I built upon, or sometimes I wrote the end of the song before I wrote the beginning, or sometimes I even start in the middle, Wow. So it kind of varies, really.
Now, there are very top musicians, I'm talking about some of the greats, who never learned how to read music. How is that they can down at a piano or play the trumpet or the drums, and they can't read music? What do you attribute to that? And how did they make music sound so good?
Well, there's like different aspects to music, right? So I have friends that are classical musicians, and they are incredible sight readers. So most classical musicians, you can throw in front of them, and they'll just blow right through it, and almost play perfect the first time. And then and now I have friends that are classical musicians and play jazz. So they can do both. Now, I know of people who can read music, and then in terms of improvising, that's not really their forte. So they need to see written music. And then when you're playing jazz and you're improvising, you're spontaneously creating melodies, right? And, so there's different skills that really are acquired or worked on, or some things come natural to people. But, reading is a skill, and it's something that, I myself, I'm not a fantastic reader. I can read, depending, if something's really hard, I have to work on it to get it. But to answer your question in terms of how people don't read, it depends on how they relate to the songs and if they're using their ear or not. So some people use a combination of theory and their ear. So, what they do is, start looking at stuff in terms of what chord changes are in the song, and, what maybe scales are related to them, or some people just play solely by ear. and I'll tell you, one of my favorite musicians that's an absolute incredible trumpeter, and his piano playing is incredible, is Arturo Sandoval. And, so I had, like, the honor of, sitting with him, and I was kind of questioning him on, his piano technique and all. And he can read like crazy, but on the piano, he just does everything by ear. And if you see what he does, it's really scary how good he is. And you know what I'm saying? So there's really different skills, and reading isn't necessarily a skill that's needed to play music, but where it comes in handy is if you're just going to a gig and playing with other people and the stuff is written out. If you don't read it, it's difficult, and if you do, it makes it easy for the people who are booking the gigs and calling in the performers, because it saves time, for rehearsal and so forth. So, reading's a really handy skill to have, but it's absolutely not necessary for someone to be able to play.
So that leads me to, what are your immediate goals? Now that you said you're moving, and you also have a job, Tony, don't you? This is not your full-time job.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, thank God I have the most loving wife, because I practice about 4 hours every day, and I usually spend most of the weekend practicing and writing, and I have a full-time job where I work between 9 to 10 hours a day.
Wow.
So I don't sleep very much.
No, it sounds like it. Oh, my God. So
yes.
You must have a passion, a love for what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. I'd say probably the thing that I really enjoy the most about it is I really do enjoy writing. I never listen to myself, so I have a lot of stuff that I recorded, but so I kind of, every once in a while, it's kind of funny. I remember one time my wife and I were out, and I hear this song, and I'm going, wow, that's pretty cool. And I'm listening. I said, I didn't that piano player, because a lot of times I'll hear something, I'll say, that's Horace Silver, and that's Bill Evans. And I'm listening. I said, oh, wait a second, that's me. So it's, but my short-term goal, like I said, we're going to be moving in a few weeks, and I'm working on a new CD. I just put one out a few weeks ago, and I've been writing.
The name, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, actually, it was kind of inspired by us living here in California. It's called 101. There's a Route 101 that runs, north and south. So initially, we were going to name it 101 North, and we found out that there was someone had an album name, and we just said, okay, 101 South, and there was somebody that used that, and then we said, okay, we'll just name it 101. So that was my wife's idea.
Great.
And so she does all the artwork and all the. In fact, I'm pretty much like useless without her. She takes care of the artwork and booking things and all the promotional things. But short term, like I said, we're going to be moving, and I'm working on some new material, and I pretty much put my band back together that I had in Fort Wayne.
That's great.
So,
well, good for you. So if our audience wants to listen to your music, how do they do that? And give them the name again of your CD and the one coming up, so that they are prepared to buy it once they listen to the first one.
Yeah, sure. So I have a website, and it's real easy. So it's all small case letters. It's TonyMarino.us. So it's TonyMarino.us. And if you just type in like Tony Marino Latin Jazz, a bunch of things will pop up. So the latest release is Tony 101. And the new CD, I think what we're going to be calling it, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be called Sound Investment. So, but like I said, I have half of the song written for that CD, and it'll probably have somewhere between 10 to 12 tunes. So I'm in the process of writing that. And I'm working on another one, too, but I don't know how long that's going to take, but I'm working on a Bach Invention CD.
Now, wait a minute.
So,
did you say Bach?
Yeah, I've been working on the inventions. When I was younger, I used to, play them for my piano lessons, and it's just something I do to, try to, keep my playing, put a decent level, and get better at being able to play.
So if I'm understanding you, it sounds like you're using, I mean, when you talk about Bach, you're talking about the most wonderful and fascinating classical pianists and writers. I mean, Bach? How do you use Bach in jazz?
Well, it's a different discipline. In jazz, like what you're trying to do is you're creating melodies on the spot, and so you're moving around and making your fingerings up. The Bach is really, a special skill because all of your fingers have to be in a specific place at a specific time. And, for me, since I haven't really been working on that very much, it's a lot of work, but I think it really helps, being able to have that type of playing under your belt. Because essentially jazz is just music that comes from all over the place. You have, it starts blues, it originally probably started like a ragtime music blues, and then, different like African rhythm and patterns, South American patterns, along with European harmonies and melodies and so forth. So, I think the more stuff you get experience, it gives you a lot more things that you can pull from, in writing and improvising. But, for me, that stuff's really hard. I mean, it takes me a long time to work the fingerings out. And, so essentially, you learn them hands separate and then putting the hands together. It's a lot of work.
Sure. Well, today my guest has been Tony Marino, who is very versatile, jazz, blues, Brazilian, you name it. Tony does it, and he does it very well. So Tony gave you the name of, I repeat one more time, Tony, for our audience.
Sure. So it's TonyMarino.us, TonyMarino.us.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Tony, for being on the Susan Brender Show. You are an inspiration, and I think our audience is going to love you. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Susan. I hope we get to do this another time.
We sure will. So thank you again. And I want to say to everybody in the audience, go buy Tony's CD. You're going to love it, and it's going to be something that you really love a lot.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.